when I took that sports officiating class, the very first day the coach said, how many of you played basketball to any degree? Every hand went up and said, yeah, we all played. How many of you know the rules? Everybody's hands went up. So I said, what we're going to do is we're going to take the National Federation High School test. It's 100 questions, but it was an open book test. And he gave us 5 or 6 class periods, so we had a lot of time. And you're literally sitting there with the rule book, looking them up. What do you think the highest score on that test was? 60. So his point was, every one of you played, every one of you thinks you know the rules, and clearly we didn't.
All right, we are ecstatic to have Bret Kinghorn here, and you are a great husband, a great father, you're a great businessman, you're a great golfer, but what I am most impressed with of your life is the fact that you have been an official, a basketball official for 35 years. That takes a certain level of amazingness or craziness. I'm not sure what to describe it. So take me through, how did you get into becoming a basketball official?
So my freshman year in college, I have a cousin who's 15 years older than me, and I went to Rick's college. That dates me. He told me his favorite class in college was sports officiating. Huh. And so he told me that during the first semester, so they had a second semester, so I decided, great, I'll sign up. And we were required to officiate the intramural sports. So I did basketball, I did volleyball, I think I did fencing. I mean, you name it. If it was played, we had to learn how to officiate it. Well, I took to basketball. I played, and I thought it was fun. And I had our teacher was one of the college coaches, a guy named Wade Anderson, and Coach Anderson said, you can do this a little bit. I'm like, and at 18, what do you know about anything? And so I did like it. Served an LDS mission, came home. I'm from Georgia, so I'm going to the church on Saturdays and reffing church basketball games just because I like it. And one of the guys there was a high school official. He said, you should do high school. I'm like, high school? No, this is fun. I just like doing this. And he said, no, you really should. And so I don't remember if he signed me up, but he, kind of coerced me in. And so I started doing high school. So my first high school season was the 1990-91 high school season.
Wow. What does that look like? Because I think I've recently started to help at Riverton High School as an assistant, and I am terrified of being a head coach in any sort of a game, whether that's freshman, sophomore, whatever. Like, to be the head coach scares me to death. How did you get into officiating high school basketball games, and what does that process look like to become, official in that capacity?
Yeah, so you have to register with your state association. So for Utah, it's the Utah High School Activity Association, back there, Georgia, obviously. Mm-hmm. And you have to pass 2 tests. Now you have to pass background check, which we didn't have to do way back when. But and I had shared with you before, I don't know if you want me to tell you the story about in college, when I took that sports officiating class, the very first day the coach said, how many of you played basketball to any degree? Every hand went up and said, yeah, we all played. How many of you know the rules? Everybody's hands went up. So I said, what we're going to do is we're going to take the National Federation High School test. It's 100 questions. And for us, still as officials, it's open book. The first one. The second one, depending on your state, they do it different ways, but it was an open book test. And I shared with you, what do you think the highest score, open book, on that test was?
I want Eric to answer because
What do you think the highest score is? So open book, and he gave us 5 or 6 class periods, so we had a lot of time, and you're literally sitting there with the rule book, looking them up.
I feel like you're setting me up for a low number here. Well, I'm going to say 64%.
That is an excellent guess, 60.
Ooh.
Okay, so 60%. And so his point was, every one of you played, every one of you thinks you know the rules, and clearly we didn't.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to pass the test, learn the rules, and then they kind of throw you in the fire. In Atlanta, we had the benefit of a ton of schools. Mm-hmm. And so they would have the brand new officials referee scrimmages because the high schools would come to there were at that time 5 associations in Metro Atlanta, and you kind of reffed by county. So I worked in Cobb and Gwinnett County. So we'd get these schools, and they'd throw guys like me out there, and there would be somebody standing next to me saying, move here, look there, look there. And you kind of just, it's, baptism by fire. You really get thrown in and learn. We do it a little bit differently today, but that was really it. You just say, I want to do it, and they say, good, you're in.
And do they start you as kind of freshman, and then you can work your way up to sophomore, JV? Is there a pay difference in those types of games? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. Anything that's below varsity is paid the sub-varsity rate. And if you ask me what I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
It's not a lot. It's probably $50 or $60 for a game.
Eric, if you and I mean, we've played a lot of basketball, but if, to your point, if we were to step out game one and officiate, we probably couldn't even run the court the correct way that a referee does.
I was in high school and I tried to referee. They had me as part of the local rec center ref. I think it was like third graders, and it was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life. And the parents were so terrible. And it's junior jazz. It's not even like super league competitive. And I was a nervous wreck, so I don't know how you do it.
Brett, I think church ball might have been the hardest.
I tell people, if you can ref church ball, you can do what I do. Because if I have a problem at church ball or junior jazz, county rec, it doesn't matter. I don't have anybody to go to. In a high school game, I have the athletic director. Sometimes I have the police. If I have a problem, I have somebody that can help me.
Yeah.
Because I take care of what happens inside the lines.
Yeah.
Outside the lines is what's hard. And for those non-high school places, it is difficult. And if you can do it there, you really can do what I do. That's what I tell people.
I don't think I could. But how are you evaluated? So how do you upgrade from, okay, we trust you with freshmen, now we trust you on the varsity level? And then even if you want to take it, how do you go from officiating high school to college to the NBA?
Okay, so within the high school ranks, we're all ranked. So a 100 ranked official is the highest ranked official, and 800 is the lowest ranked official. And I won't go through all of them, but a 100 official should be able to referee any game in the state at any time with any partner. Okay. That's a 100. And 800 is a brand new official. And so 500 through 800 are sub-varsity rankings, 400 through 100 are varsity rankings. Okay. And so we have paid evaluators in different parts of the state that watch us and see. The trick is, how do you get seen by the right people? Because it's a subjective process at the high school level. We're volunteers. I was in charge for years of my chapter where we had to nominate, vote on, evaluate people to move up. But if you move up, somebody usually has to move down.
Interesting.
And that's a hard process. We have people that have been there a long time, done a great job, have lost a step, don't see as well, whatever. And you don't want to make them feel bad that you've lost it. Most officials know it's time to step away. Some don't. And that's really, really hard.
Yeah.
Is there chatter that this guy is coming up and he's really good? And
yeah. And one of the things, it's a word of mouth, but one of the big things now is camps. So when teams go to camps, there's usually an officiating camp alongside it. And these officials pay money to have somebody like me or somebody else evaluate them. Roy High School had a camp 2 weekends ago over Memorial Day weekend, and I was asked to come up and evaluate. And I only saw a few games, but I had one person in particular from up north in Cache Valley that I texted his president, and I said, this guy can referee. Don't lose him.
Yeah.
And so it's sometimes that, you hate to think that people would hold somebody else down because they don't want to take my games. And I learned from a guy a long time ago, you earn the right to get games. Yeah. They're not going to take mine. They're going to earn their own. Yeah. And so I'm all about how do you help the next generation, because I don't know how many years I have left. So I'd like to see it continue, be better than when I got here. My brother and I used to run a basketball camp up at Utah State with a guy from Colorado. And the whole reason we started the camp was we need a teaching camp. We just need a place where people can come and be seen. Because today you asked about how I moved from high school to college, camps. And a lot of them are tryout camps where you go and referee. They don't give you any feedback other than we're going to hire you or we're not going to hire you. That literally, well, they don't even tell you we're not going to hire you. You just don't hear anything. And so people pay a lot of money to learn or to try and get hired to be a Division I basketball official because the pay is good, right? The lifestyle's terrible, but the pay is good.
And is that evaluation going on not just the correct calls, but positioning and hand signal? Like what goes into that evaluation?
So, the biggest thing I tell any official is if you want to get better games, get your calls right. Coaches don't know necessarily where we're supposed to stand, what we do with our hands, those kind of things. But they know if you get plays right. So if you get your plays right, it's amazing how good your games can be.
Brett, what's your blood pressure like? Is it, is it high? Is it...
I don't take blood pressure medication, even at my age. I tell people, you learn pretty quickly whether you like this or you don't, because there's so much confrontational confrontation naturally in what we do.
So much.
It's emotional. You know, a coach gets upset. You have to try not to get upset. It's really it's really hard at times. You know, we used to have a coach come talk to our high school group every year, and the number one question when they opened it up was, "How do you want us to talk to you?"
Yeah.
Because that's the hardest thing, is talking to coaches, because they're upset. They can get you upset. You think you're right. They think you're wrong. Now what?
Yeah.
And so the whole interaction, it's a hard thing. And I think part of the reason why I've lasted as long as I have, I've got thick skin. I've been called everything but a nice guy, trust me. But I think most coaches respect me because I'll talk to them.
Yeah.
Do I give them the answer they want every time? No. I've just learned, I'm going to tell you what I saw.
Yeah.
You tell me what you saw and we'll talk about it. And sometimes I'm going to say, Coach, you saw it this way, I saw it that way, and we got to go.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that you've got this interesting balance, just knowing you off camera here, of the fact that you have to be confident in what you're saying, but you're also not so self-aggrandizing that you're not willing to listen and to get that feedback back and forth.
one of the things that happens with time is confidence. And I've told plenty of coaches, I missed that one.
Mm-hmm.
I missed it. And I will tell you, the ones that have been around a long time say, okay, they're not ready to roast you.
Yeah.
And I've had coaches say, I knew it. And they jump you and you're like, that's the last time I'm ever going to tell them I missed one.
Yeah.
Because look, any game I have video on, I go back and review. Did I make the right call? And was it a good call? Mm-hmm. Meaning, in the context of the game, did that play fit? It might have been correct by rule. It's not a good call. Mm-hmm. So I go back and look at it. And I've gone back to plenty of coaches and said, hey, I had you 2 weeks ago. You remember this play we talked about? I missed it. Mm-hmm. Or I'll come back and say, you know what? I watched that play 10 times. I really think I got it right.
Yeah.
And the ones that I have a ton of respect for say, okay. And I knew you'd tell me if you're wrong, because look, I've missed my share. Absolutely. But
Yeah.
the coaches that are willing to say, I get it. You know, you tried. Okay.
Yeah.
On to the next.
Back when I was playing and I was a captain and we'd have those captains meetings, I'd kind of pull the referees aside and say, look, like, I'm not going to make every shot. I'm going to make mistakes. I expect the same here. That's okay. And then we'll kind of get through it. I've always tried to be a little bit of a peacemaker in this regard. But to your point, I mean, every time you make a call, I would say that 90% of your calls, half of the people in the stands hate it and half of them agree with it. And even those that agree don't think that it was strong enough in certain instances. So you mentioned that you admit sometimes that you've missed a call. And so we had a question from the internet around, are there makeup calls in officiating?
So there's a huge perception that there is. And in my world, there's not.
Okay.
I will tell the coach I missed that. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go miss
Another one
down there. I'm just not. I'm going to tell them I'm going to do my best to be in position and see the play right and make it right. Now, I will tell you, one of the things we talk about is matching calls as partners. So if we have a 50-50 play and I call a charge, if you have a 50-50 play, I hope you call charge. Conversely, if you call block first and it's 50-50, mine's going to be a block. Mm-hmm. Now, there's sometimes when it's an obvious charge, you got to call the charge. But we try to match play so the coach doesn't say, look, man, down here it was a block and down here it's a charge. You got me twice. Now, sometimes that happens, just that's what the plays are.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, like, if I miss one, I'm going to tell them, don't match that one. Mm-hmm. That was wrong.
Yeah.
So the makeup call, I think there's a perception that it happens, but I'm telling you at a very high level, no. Because every play is videoed, and I don't want to have to explain to an assigner that, well, yeah, my partner missed it, so I missed one too. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that.
That brings up another question we got from the internet is, what is a charge? It seems like the high school game loves the charge call. It seems like it's more prevalent in high school than it is in other levels.
Let me tell you why that is. In our game, in the high school game, kids that put their head down and kind of go hell-bent for leather to the basket is not good for the game. And there are a lot of high school kids that just do that. I'm going, and it doesn't matter who's in the way, I'm going. That's not good for the game usually. Mm-hmm. So by a rule, a charge is I have to be within 6 feet, both feet on the floor facing my opponent. I'm allowed to move in any direction except closing the gap to the offensive player. Mm. Now, as long as I stay in legal defense, I can't commit a foul. Mm. The foul has to, if there's contact, it has to be on the offense. Yeah. So it's either a no call or a charge. But as soon as I do anything illegal, I get out of legal guarding position, it's most likely on me. Mm. I will tell you there is a bias, I think, towards charges because I think for years we penalized good defense. And kids are pretty good defenders today. As long as they don't, use their hands, they're good at shuffling their feet and getting in position. They know if I do what I'm supposed to, I will get a whistle. Yeah. So I think that's why there's kind of a bias towards a charge.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
We want to ask how you handle a missed call from your crewmates.
Because to your point, I think you said there's level 100, and was it 400 and above is going to be varsity time?
1, 2, 3, and 4.
So if you're a 100 level official, does that make you kind of the lead official in a game of
Usually.
200s and 400 or whatever
Usually.
that would be? Okay.
So referee, umpire 1, umpire 2 is what the crew positions are. Perfect. All that it means with a referee is the rule says anything not covered by the rules or that has to be decided when there isn't a unanimous decision is decided by the referee. Okay. But other than that, our whistles, our calls mean the same. If I'm the referee and I don't like something you do, I can't go over and say, I'm changing that. We're not going with that.
Whoa. Everybody who argues a call is convinced that you're going to change it if you made it wrong.
So I think you said I've done this almost 35 years. You know how many calls I've changed because of that?
How many?
Zero.
Yeah.
Zero. You just don't.
Yeah.
Right? So what do you do if, look, if you have to know if your partner knows they missed the call, right? And if they say, look, look, that happens to us all.
Yeah.
Like, hey, shake it off, get the next one, right? If they're having trouble with, I think I got that right, but everybody knows it was wrong, that's when you have a harder time. I can't go change their call. I can't make them call it the way I think it is. You just try and, the hardest thing I think as players is if they're seeing one thing at one end and something else at the other. Consistency in my mind is similar plays get similar whistles or no whistles.
Yeah.
So it's hard for a player if I'm going to let you touch a little bit, but as soon as the hand goes on at the other end, they call a foul. I'm like, okay, as a player, that's really hard. What can I do?
Yeah.
So you just try and say as a crew, like, we want to call similar plays in similar ways.
And so when there are timeouts, that's when the teams and the coaches kind of huddle up. Do the officials also huddle up during timeout and kind of review that of, hey, let's talk about this play here, and what are you feeling, and what are you seeing?
Yeah, I'll generally just say, tell me what you had on that play.
Yeah.
Now, look, we have 3 distinct coverage areas with 3 people on the floor, so there are some places where it overlaps, but I should not be looking at your call or your call unless it's in one of those coverage areas that overlaps. In the key, plays at the basket, there's a lot of times we're going to have 2 sets of eyes. Somebody's a primary play caller, somebody's a secondary play caller, and we always say, if you're a secondary play caller, have a patient whistle, because there might be a reason why you didn't call that. And I better be 100% sure that it's a foul. There might have been a really good reason why you didn't. So don't think. If a partner comes to me and say, I think, I'm like, then stop right there. If you don't know, we don't blow.
Yeah.
That's
a
how
good
it has
motto.
to be.
Yeah.
Right? So anytime we talk about it, if somebody says think, I'm like, stop right there. You don't know.
Yeah.
Brett, do you ever huddle up and just say, hey, I just want to make sure you guys know I'm a 100 official? If there were any questions.
I've ever said that to anybody. How's that?
Okay. Hey, what do you think is the most effective way to communicate with players or coaches or someone that you would actually engage with, not a fan?
Both you as an official and then back to you, I think, is kind of the...
Yeah,
so I'm the one who generally runs those captains' meetings.
Okay.
And my number one thing with boys is I'll say, act like a man, I'm going to treat you like a man. You act like a kid, I'm going to treat you like a kid. Right? If we can be respectful of one another, we can talk. As soon as you're disrespectful, we're through. So I don't have any problem with it if a player comes to me and says, can you tell me why? Absolutely. If he comes to me and says, you missed that play, I'm going to say, stop talking.
Yeah.
Right? So you get what you give. I'm a huge proponent of you get more flies with honey than with vinegar. So you come to me like all upset. I'm like, whoa, calm down. Right? I'll talk, but I'm not going to let you talk in a way that I would never let my own kids speak to me.
Yeah.
Right? I'm an adult, you're a child. I'm in a position of authority, you're not. So there's a lot of things that go into that. It's not like, hey, I'm flexing on you because I'm in charge. It's not about that for me. But there's got to be decorum.
Yeah.
And I tell a coach, you can't ever say anything to me that I can't say to you. Right?
Yeah.
Because if it's wrong for me to say it to you, you should not be able to say that to me.
Yeah.
So
That's great. What about parents?
oh,
When my mom and dad yell at you, is that going to get me more calls?
probably less. Probably less. So I told you before we went on air, my brother's an official. I've been doing it almost as long as I have. And I called him because I couldn't remember where this happened, and we think we know what the school was, but we don't look that much alike. Okay. I mean, you wouldn't say brothers just right out of the chute. You wouldn't. But
he's in Utah, though?
he lives in St. George.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And so but he lived up here for years, and we refereed a lot of games together. We were reffing, and I can't remember who made the call. I think I made the call. And as I turned, I go to the table and report the foul and going to go do what we're going to do, somebody in the stands yells, "You and your ugly twin sister both suck." And I thought they were going to burst blood vessels. They were so angry at the call, so upset. And I walked over, his name's Kelly. I said, "Kelly, did you hear that?" He goes, "Yeah, that was great." I'm like, "I know, right?" And we just laughed that they were so mad about a call that we joke and say, "Look, if Stevie Wonder saw it, we better see it."
Yeah.
And that was a Stevie Wonder call. Stevie Wonder saw that one.
Yeah.
And that parent was just about to lose their mind. So, look, the stuff from the stands, my point with you guys about who knows the rules, I guarantee you the parents don't know the rules.
No.
I guarantee it. And look, when I watch my kid or I watch my team, I'm biased. I know that, right? I am. Everybody is.
Yeah.
But most parents can't remove themselves and say, I'll even tell you when I'm watching my team and the referee makes the right call and everybody, "Ooh, boo, boo," I'm like, it was right. I don't like it, but it was right.
Yeah.
Right? That's what happens.
Brett, we've got an official report here. Actually, 48 hours after that game, that fan died of a stroke.
I believe it.
So it's there.
I mean, I'm telling you, they yelled just literally, I thought they were going to burst blood vessels. They were so angry about this call. And I'm like, wow.
It's so funny because when we were chatting about a month ago when we were at the same thing, and just a little bit about background about us, I was telling you, I played high school, I went to Jordan, and you were like, I have a Jordan story about a parent. Do you want to share that story? Because it turns out it was like my second it's like an adopted dad where this happened to. So tell that story, what you remember about Jordan.
Yeah, so this is back in the days when we had two officials, and we inbound the ball at half, and I'm the guy inbounding the ball, right? And it was Brighton and Jordan. I mean, I remember who the schools were. And a Jordan kid steals the pass from Brighton and goes down to lay the ball up, and the kid fouls him. And I call a foul, right? And this dad, just him on the end, jumps up like, "You're terrible." And I said, "You're out of here." I mean, I just threw him out right then. And in 35 years, I've thrown 3 or 4 fans. I don't do that.
Yeah.
But when he jumps up and it's him and me, I said, "Okay, you're out." And I walk over to the head coach and I said, "That guy's out." And he said, "What did my dad do?" And I'm like, "Oh, no. I just threw the coach's dad out."
It's the coach's dad.
Well, that's what I thought in the moment.
Oh, yeah.
And then I later learned that it was a player's dad.
Yeah.
But what did my dad do? And I'm like, but in the moment, I thought I threw the coach's dad out. How in the world did I do that?
And I remember that.
It was a Jordan.
That was my year. It wasn't my dad, but it was a very close friend's dad. So that's funny.
We're going to fact check that one. It might have been his dad.
Which brings up another question for me is, what is the kind of trigger point for you to calling a technical or to throwing out a parent or something like that? Because it seems like a lot of referees are very patient, and so it takes a lot, and then eventually there's just I'm done, technical, whatever that is.
So when I was a younger official, I called a lot of technical fouls because that's the only way I knew how to deal with a hostile situation. Coach gets upset, player gets upset, boom, technical foul. And it diffuses it because they have to stop or they get the second, they get ejected, right? Everybody knows you can get 1, don't get 2. And so as a younger official, I called a lot. As I got more mature in my career, I'm not sure I called a technical foul last year other than like a hanging on the rim or an administrative one for the book, things like that. I don't know that I called one on a player or a coach because I feel like I can kind of diffuse it. It generally, for me, the line is usually if it starts with the word "you," because it's never "you are the best official."
But it should be. Yes.
It's going to be "you suck," "you missed it," and if it becomes personal, that's when I'm going to give them the stop sign and say stop. And if they don't, then that's when they get the technical foul.
How many coaches or players even know you by first name? You see that in the NBA. They refer to him all the time by first name. Do you get the same?
Yeah, so the coaches that have been around, yeah, sure. They'll say, "Hey, Brett, come here." And, during a free throw or a timeout, yeah, I will. I'll talk to him. And if I see him, you just mentioned a coach that's retiring. I saw him in the airport in California a few years ago. I'm like, "Hey, Scott, how are you?"
Yeah.
And, we talked for a minute, and I don't have a personal relationship with him, but I know him. He knows me enough on the floor that it's a comfortable conversation. And, I want, to me, I try and find ways to have interactions with coaches. They see we're regular guys. And, Steve Galley that coached at West Jordan, then at Riverton, he and I didn't always see eye to eye about just philosophy of officiating, but he saw me it was a Rush concert. I mean, a rock concert.
Nice.
What are you doing here? What are you doing here? I'm a fan. You know, and it kind of changed our relationship because, like, you know what? He's a guy. Oh, he's a guy.
Yeah.
And so it was great for that. So anytime I can see a coach off the floor and just talk about who they are, they're a husband, they're a father, or she's a wife, you know, just whatever it is, it just it makes us people, and it really does change the adversarial part of it. You still may not like what I did, but you can say, Bret, what the? And I'm like, what did you see? Just tell me what you saw. Okay, from where I was standing, this is what I saw. And the points of view, like when I review film, sometimes the camera doesn't show me what I need to see because it's just where it is. And it's the same with the coach is standing here and I'm standing there. You see it differently than I do.
Yeah.
So
I love that what you said about the kind of humanizing everybody, because I think it's so easy for us, not just with officials and players and coaches, but in life, to dehumanize people that we don't agree with. And we're in the insurance industry, and I think insurance carriers have that a lot of. You dehumanize it into this big company, and now everybody hates individuals that they don't even know. And so I love how you mentioned that. Take me through with coaches and
Could I maybe add one other thing to that?
Yeah.
So there was a problem with some coaches and officials a few years ago, and I was the president of the state at that time, and I was asked to come and sit in. And these coaches asked about some things, and I said, let me just tell you something. I said, every one of the people that go to officiate your games has a job. And sometimes their boss yells at them right as they're walking out the door to go referee a game at 3:30 or at 5 o'clock. Or maybe they got into it with their spouse or a child. They had gotten a wreck. They got a ticket. I mean, when we walk into the gym, you know, we have a life. And I said, we can't get traveling right. We can't all call traveling the same way. And so you're asking me, how do we have these interactions with coaches? Look, everybody has a life, and it's going on so differently. Like, I don't know what happened to you today any more than you know what happened to me today.
Right.
And so when we have that, it's so hard sometimes to say, you know what, he's a guy, she's a gal, and maybe it's okay, right?
Yeah.
Instead of jumping like, hey, everything all right? And I've had coaches say, Bret, everything okay? I'll say, you know what, I had a tough day. And they're like, okay. Because it happens.
And the same thing with these kids too, right? Like I as I help with the high schoolers, I put myself back into that situation. And my parents got divorced while I was in high school, and then relationships with either friends or girls or whatever else, and then just your body is changing and all the hormones. Plus, you think that this is your future and your life, and so any negative call looks bad on you to a potential college or whatever. So I think like we're all these humans trying our best to make the most of this opportunity.
Well, and I say more in the context of life, but nobody knows what's going on in the four walls of anybody's home.
Yeah.
Like we might think, oh, that's a happy family, or but to your point, you know, your parents got divorced. So clearly some things were going on in the home that's not calm or, you know, normal, what we would call normal. And we have that as officials too. You know, sometimes I had a client yell at me and like, God, now I'm in a crappy mood and I got to go referee this basketball game, right? Like, well, you better watch out.
Watch out, Steve Galley.
Like Steve,
I'm coming for you.
Exactly. So,
Hey, so just a question here, Bret, is you get paid the same regardless of how intense a game is, if it's tight, if it's a blowout. But what's your preference? What do you like to officiate more?
Truthfully, it depends on my partners.
Okay.
If I have two good partners, I know I call my third, you call your third, and you call your third, I want a close game, always. When I'm with somebody that's struggling, the last thing I want is we have to make a decision on the last shot of the game. Was it a foul? Was it not a foul? Right?
It's a great answer.
It's hard.
Yeah, that is tough. We're going back to like the coaches and stuff. You have been around for a long time. You watched a lot of basketball. You've been involved in a lot of basketball games with coaches and players. What stands out to you about solid, consistent teams, coaches, players? What makes a good coach, a good player?
So a lot of it to me is you look at the programs that seem to be good every year, and I'm going to use Olympus just because they're on a great run.
They're
right now.
so solid.
Okay, but where does it start? Matt Barnes, right? And Matt has a way to do it. Have I been in any of Matt's practices? No, I've never been in one of Matt's practices. But I guarantee you, Matt has a way. He does things. Quincy Lewis, when he was the coach at Lone Peak, one of the things I said, I would tell people about Quincy as a coach, same thing. I've never been in practice with Quincy, but they were always winning by 25 or 30 in the fourth quarter. So he's not playing the JV kids. He's playing the sophomores. And Quincy would call timeout, and I could hear in the huddle, that's not how we do it. And if you're going to play here, you're going to do it the way we do it. He's winning by 30 points, and he's calling timeouts to coach his sophomores, right? It's a way, it's a program, it's a culture. We do it this way. And it's one of the things I really respected about Quincy is Quincy didn't worry about us. That was another thing. Like, Quincy might say, Bret, what do you got? And I'm like, this is what I had. He's like, all right. and he just never ever dwelt on a call. But he was coaching his kids all the dang time. And that's why I think they were always so. Now, you had good players.
Yeah.
But you did it the Lone Peak way, or you didn't play at Lone Peak.
Yeah.
And that's why I think a lot of it.
Is Quincy Lone Peak the same as Quincy Lehigh?
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
You also, let's go to the players now. So do you know going into a game, okay, I've got, Daniel Dean back in my days, or you've got the Gavin Lowe's of the world, or you've got Cale Barkley's, you've got these high-profile high school players. Do you know going in who they are, and does that impact at all what you're looking at?
Yeah, there are some officials that are very up on all the players' names, kind of what they do. Look, I want to know who the good players are. So, yes, I know that. Once you've had a team once or twice, you know who you've got to officiate. I kind of do it in reverse. We have a thing we call game wreckers. Who are the game wreckers? Usually it's the football player that comes in is there for 5 fouls and to set screens and a rebound, right? That's who that is. And when Meat comes in, we got eyes on him because he's headhunting, right?
When Meat comes in.
So it's not always, and they're not necessarily dirty. Yeah. Puka Nakua, when he played, was a game wrecker, not in a negative sense. He was so athletic, he would make a play that would surprise you. And it was usually blocking a shot, coming over the top of somebody. So you had to officiate Puka, like coming through the key, not to dunk it, but to block something was illegal, right? And he's a guy that could ruin the game in a hurry if you didn't know what happened. Because that's the thing more than anything. We just have to know what happened.
Yeah.
So we talk about kind of the negative more than the positive. So maybe
that makes a lot of sense, because it puts a lot more pressure on you to know when I'm a player, I don't want to get hurt. And so the football players always scared me too, because it was like, I can get hurt from this. But you were officiated a very big game this year with Timpview and Olympus with Gavin Lowe and Dean Ruckert. Take me through that dynamic, because both schools are very proud schools, a lot going on, and 2 superstars. What do you remember? What were your thoughts on that game?
So we have what we call a pregame. Every time we officiate, we meet before the game, and we talk about players, coaches, situations. If there's a rule, something that we're not, we want to make sure we adjudicate correctly. When we pre-gamed, we said there's 2 kids you really got to watch in this game, Ruckert and Lowe, right? Well, it turns out Lowe guarded Ruckert, so that was easy. Like, I'm always watching you two because you're matched up. But some about their tendencies. Like, about Timpview. Timpview is going to shoot it. They zone a lot, with Matt Barnes. He plays man-to-man until he dies, right? They just man everything. And, you got to watch shooters. So whereas be good on the three-point line. So if we have what's called a trail and a center that are the outside officials. If you're C or T, you've got to make sure if it's a 3 and watch the shooter. Take him up, bring him down. With the flop rule that came in this year, it put an emphasis on you got to know, did they really get hit or did they fake it? So, that's kind of what we talked about for Olympus and Tiffy. We knew they're both going to shoot it, so you got to be good on the line.
Take me through that flopping rule and those who watch and listen, because the game has evolved a lot in 35 years, but also in 10 years, right? So how has that flopping rule been implemented, and then any other changes to the game that you've seen over the last time you've been doing this?
Well, so, with the flop rule, I'll be honest, we didn't call a ton. The penalty, it's a violation the first time, and the second time it's a technical foul on the team, right? Most of the flops that I had during the season were on 3-point shots. Why? Because somebody runs out at them, they stick their leg out, or, they just crumple to the floor because they missed the shot and they think they want contact. And so I think probably every one of my flop warnings, and I didn't have a technical foul, I just had warnings, were for 3-point shot, shooters acting like they got hit.
Yeah.
And look, I was a shooter when I played. I always thought I got fouled. And so I guess I'm kind of just clued into, I'm watching to make sure, was that a legal defensive play, right? But, if I go up as a 3-point shooter, up, down, because it's a shooting foul while I'm in the air. Once I hit the ground, it's a common foul. It's not a shooting foul anymore. So you have to know that. But, the NBA did us a favor a few years ago because they published some plays that they sent out, and they didn't send them to us, but, we find them online, and it showed, if this happens, that's not a foul. Don't call that a foul. The NBA is very good about saying this play is called like this. So people complain about NBA officiating, but I'm telling you, they call it the way the league wants it called.
Yeah.
Right? They do, because they'll lose their job. They fire NBA officials every year. So call this play like that or you don't have a job. So when we get upset about it, they're calling it the way the league told them to call it. We may not agree with it, but that's what it is.
What is the hand signal for the flop?
So it's this, right? So we go to the table and say, I got a flop warning on white, flop, and mark in the book. And so it's just this, get up.
We're putting that in our text thread from here on out.
Yes, we are.
Do you have that as an emoji, 2 hands?
No, we're going to, yeah.
We need to. Yeah. And it reminds me, because we're going to get into the evolution of this game here, we had a question here of what is a travel? And then you look, and that has evolved so much there's a carry involved here. There's the Euro step that's happened a lot. So again, over the course of your officiating career, how do you define the traveling and the carrying of the ball and all of these different things that have changed with the NBA? I think that's kind of like.
Okay, so I don't want anybody to hold this against me that listens to this. I'm a terrible travel ref. Yeah. That's the hardest call for me to make. I'm just going to be honest with you because it happens so fast.
It does.
And if I'm not sure, I don't call it. Because I would rather allow an illegal move than penalize a legal one. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's how so you just have to know that's my bias.
Yeah.
If guys that have been around a long time know, if I call a travel in a game, like, man, that must have been a travel. And if I get 2, they're all like, whoa, 2. And I'm like, look, they were.
Yeah.
Really the easiest way to talk about a travel is if your pivot foot leaves the floor and comes back down, it's a travel. Okay. That's how it is. And I'll tell you a story about the NBA. Mm-hmm. So I was at a camp in San Diego, more than 20 years ago, and we had an NBA official that was there evaluating, and great guy. And so after we'd reffed games all day, we're in a room with film and it's video, tapes, right? That's how long ago it was. So he brings a training tape from the NBA. So he puts it in, and you would see the play, and then there'd be a voiceover from a guy named Daryl Garrettson, who was the head of officiating at that time in the NBA. So he runs the play, and there's, 50 referees, 80 referees in this room. What's the play? Travel. That's a travel. All right, let's watch it again. Travel. That's a travel. And they said, all right, let's watch it in slow motion. It's still a travel. And then he said, okay, well, let's hear what the league said. This play was incorrectly called travel because of blah, 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 blah. And we're all like, the NBA travel rule is different than ours. What we grew up in high school, right? It's different.
There's always 2 steps, but in the NBA, there's like a gather step, and then there's another couple of steps.
So it's different, right? And so I tell people that it's so hard. And I'm going to tell you, I've done some things for the Jazz. So I've reffed some NBA players. I'm not an NBA referee. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not at that level. But I've seen those players up close. They are so big, so strong, so athletic. People just cannot believe how talented and athletic they are, right? They do things that, and maybe I shared this with you. The example I use is Andre Karolinko. Karolinko was a legitimate 6'10" guy, and he could move like a little man. He just did things agility-wise that, you're just shocked. They're all like that now. Yeah. I mean, they're all just so talented. But this NBA official said something interesting, because I asked the question, where are you from? I said, Salt Lake City. He said, okay. Karl Malone takes 4 steps and goes right down the key and dunks it in the Delta Center. You think I'm calling travel? I'm like, well, if it's travel, yeah. And he goes, no. He said, if Michael Jordan in Chicago Stadium takes 4 steps and goes right down the key and dunks it, do you think I'm calling traveling? I don't know. He said, no. He said, the sooner you learn that the NBA is more about entertainment than basketball, the easier it is to watch.
Right.
He said, why do you think superstars don't foul out?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to watch them play.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
and that's so interesting.
And that's not critical of,
yeah.
Right? It is. It's an entertainment business.
Which is so hard, I think, for you and for players and coaches, because at least these young kids, they're watching these highlights of the Steph Currys and of the and all these NBA players and all the moves they're doing. And then you try to implement that into high school, and it's a different game. Mm-hmm. It's not the same rule set that you have to deal with in the NBA. So it makes it kind of hard for everybody, and more arguments to you.
See, and you asked about Euro steps and crossovers or
gathers,
all that.
And carries.
The one that to me is, and we have an official, I'll just name him by first name, is Matt, who's a very good play caller. And he and we have training meetings that we have for high school, and in one of our training meetings, he said, I think every single spin move is a travel. If you watch, it's so hard to do a legal spin move. And he's right. Mm-hmm. But it's become an accepted part of the game that you can make a spin move and we don't call travel. Just like cupping the ball, coming all the way down, right? When we grew up, your hand's on top of the ball, or it's carry. Or the other one is, the crossovers. Our rule of thumb is if you freeze the defender because you got your hand on the side or under the ball, it's carry, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if I'm just coming up and I'm turning it over, there's no advantage there, so what's the point?
Yeah.
Right? The other one is if I pass it to you on the 3-point line, everybody catches it, hops, and shoots. Mm-hmm. That's travel. by rule.
Yeah.
It is. But it's become an accepted part of the game, so I can't be the only person that calls that, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's accepted it. So the game evolves whether we wanted it to or not.
Yeah, that's so interesting. What are some rules that people think are rules that aren't rules? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, for example, over the back is something that I hear yelled all the time.
Not a rule.
So
I don't have that in the rule book.
Yeah.
You might have a push, a hold, but we don't have over the back.
Yeah. Are there any others that you have to deal with relatively frequently of people yelling something at you that you're like, that's not?
Well,
that's
the
not.
one that we hear more than any is 3 seconds.
Okay.
Okay. And 3 seconds was put in the rule book for a guy named Will Chamberlain. Because Will Chamberlain could go park in front of the basket, bigger, stronger, they throw it to him, he'd score every single time. So that's where 3 seconds came from, right? Why do we call 3 seconds? Well, if everybody is 5'10", nobody has an advantage by being in there. Now, I'm not going to let somebody just sit in there for 30 seconds. I'm not.
Yeah.
But if somebody moves in there and they're not really doing anything, why should I stop the game for that? That just disrupts the game, right? I'm going to say get out. Get out of the key. 10, get out. I'm going to yell at him. 10. But we see people, parents especially, somebody's foot is on the lane line. 3 seconds. And by rule, it's correct. Is that a good call? No, it's not a good call. Now, if we have a significantly bigger kid that's, if everybody's 5'10", and then we got a 6'5" kid and he goes in there, and if he's camping, I guarantee you it's going to be 3 seconds. Because there's a distinct advantage.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
But to just stop the game, I tell people all the time, the best game I can officiate is where I call out of bounds and maybe an occasional foul here and there. But when the teams go up and down the floor and they're making baskets, so we don't have rebounds, we have illegal screens, those are great games to watch. They're great games to officiate. When I call 50 fouls in a game, that's no fun. We don't like that, right? We call it flow. There's no flow in the game, and we don't like to have to stop it if we don't have to. Sometimes we do, right? The players force that, and that's why we're there. But the best games are the ones where we blow very few whistles.
Well, and that brings up another question. Sorry, I keep cutting off. I love this conversation with you, and we spent a lot of hours on a golf course, and I could keep going, but it raises the question too of when you're making these calls, you mentioned the impact kind of on the game. Like, is it giving an advantage to another team? And it seems like a lot of times as I'm watching a game, things will get really physical, on ball, off ball, whatever it is, but it doesn't really impact a turnover. It doesn't impact a missed shot. But then if they are taking a shot and there's contact, then it is called. So does that, you talk about the rules, and you also mentioned that it's almost an art, really, of making the right calls, not necessarily the by the letter of the book calls. So maybe you could take us through that balance that you try to strike.
So I told you we have rules tests we have to take and pass. There was a guy who is now retired that it was probably the best book official you'd ever meet. You want to know chapter and verse, he could tell you. I mean, he really could, right? This is rule 4, article, subsection, blah, right? Good for you. He couldn't referee his way out of a paper bag because he was so hung up on, he got touched, that's a foul. It's like, was there an advantage gain? Because that's what we talk about in the game is, did I create an advantage or put you at a disadvantage? That's really when we blow our whistles. If I've got 2 really big players in the post pushing on each other, who do you call the foul on?
Yeah.
Right? That's some of the art is, let me see what happens.
Because you could call a foul on almost every possession down in every game.
Absolutely.
And that, to your point, 50 fouls just makes it a
terrible
flow.
game. Yeah,
no flow.
It's no fun. Like as a player, nobody liked that. We didn't like that. Another foul, another travel, another blah, right? We hate it. So it's have I done something to you to create an advantage for me or to put you at a disadvantage? That's what we call. And so you have to, we say we anticipate plays, not calls. Like, what do we think is going to happen? But you got to let the play happen and then say, do I like it or do I not? I have to put air in the whistle or I don't, right?
Yeah.
That's hard. And so we always say you're better off waiting a second. That's a late whistle. Maybe so.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure I got that one right.
Yeah.
I like to see what happens. So I mentioned Steve Galley. One of the things Steve and I used to always disagree about were hand checks. Steve, by rule, was correct. When somebody put their hand on a guard, he wanted it called boom. And I said, Steve, your guy got by him and made a layup. I want the foul. I said, you want me to take the layup away? Yes. But I think what Steve's thought, and I'm speaking for Steve, so Steve, if you're listening, I apologize, but he wanted the guards to be in foul trouble. Give me the backup guards, right? You call fouls on those guys, I know I get the JV kid, and I'm going to beat the JV kid.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, philosophically, I just feel very differently. If you haven't created an advantage and I put my hand on your hip, but you go right by me to the basket, I think it's terrible to call the foul there. But that's just my philosophy. We have plenty of people that will call that, wave the basket off. So
we were talking earlier about matchups, right? And how aware you are of maybe this player or that player. I'm curious how aware you and other officials are of rivalry games and, hey, we need to watch out because things could get out of hand. You mentioned the police earlier, having your back where you wouldn't have that in a church ball game. I mean, how aware are you of what the intensity of a game could be to keep it in check?
Great question. And I would tell you, when I moved here, I didn't know any of the rivalries. So I got assigned some games that I didn't know what I was in for.
Yeah.
One of the first varsity games I did was a Spanish Fork Springville game. I didn't know that was a big rivalry. But we used to dress, and I haven't been to Spanish Fork in years. It was at Spanish Fork. My partner had never been there. They had us dress in a separate building from the gym. So as we're walking from that building where we dressed to the gym, an older man stops us. And he says, okay, listen, I understand that when Spanish Fork scores their first basket tonight, tortillas are coming out of the stands.
The Dons? The Dons.
Spanish.
Yeah.
Spanish. Spanish.
Spanish Fork Dons.
I'm just saying
Tortillas.
their mascots, the
right,
Dons.
right.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay. And he said, well, because when Spanish Fork played at Springville, when Springville scored their first basket, they threw weenies out. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I turned to my partner. I'm like, do you know anything about this? He's like, no, because he was from Ogden, right? He didn't know anything about the Utah County rivalries either. And I said, well, who are you? And he said, I'm the principal of Spanish Fork. It's got to stop.
Oh, wow.
So if anything comes out of the stands, call the technical foul on us. Because by rule, we can penalize the home team if we can tell. In 35 years, I've never called it. Okay.
Yeah.
But he said, it needs to stop. So I'm telling you, I had a bunch of trepidation on the floor. All I could think about, because we have to be on the floor 15 minutes before the game, I was like, man, I hope they don't do it. I hope they don't do it. Right? I'm a young varsity official. It's a big game. And Spanish Fork scores their first basket, and I just like kind of look around, nothing. And I'm like, oh.
Nothing.
So relieved. Yes. So I had a playoff game this year. I did Woods Cross and Bountiful in the second round or third round. And they split the regular season games. And there had been the second one.
Love that you knew that, by the way. Yeah.
The second game, there had been an incident with some fans. And so we talked to the Bountiful AD before the game and just said, hey, what have we got for security? Have we got fans separated enough that, and he said, yeah. And he said, but if we have any issue at all, you need to tell me right away because we're going to stop the game and we're going to address it. I said, great. So yeah, we know. We don't do a great job as officials. So if one of you had refereed that first game and I get the second game, we don't do a great job of saying, hey, just so you know, it was really terrible. Yeah. But I knew it's a region rival. It's a real rival, and it's a playoff game. So everything about the emotions was high for that game. Nothing happened. It was fine, but we're aware.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will tell you one of the things that we do is we're between players faster. You just don't give them a chance to talk, to each other because you just don't want anything to happen. You just got to nip it in the bud.
That's awesome. We had talked about this earlier offline are you able to scratch certain schools so where I don't want to referee this coach and vice versa, coach is doing the same to you? How does that all play out?
I can't speak a ton to the coach's side because I don't know. I could be scratched by somebody and I don't know it. I know it's happened because there's usually been an incident that said it's probably best and the coach or the AD has called and said, look, I don't think this official should come the rest of the year or something. I have a couple of schools blocked because I just either have had an issue. I had a school blocked for 20 years. I wouldn't go because of who the coaches were. I didn't respect them, and I want to be fair. I just thought it's not. I shouldn't go there.
Do you get unlimited blocks, or is it a limited amount?
So
I only want to referee Riverton games because Eric is there.
Because I like Eric. So with partners, we get 3. So I can block 3 partners.
Okay.
The people I just say I don't want to referee with.
Okay.
Schools, I think right now I have 2 blocked.
Okay.
So I don't know. I've never had very many. It just it's if I've had an issue with the coach that I just think, hey, it's best if we both take a timeout, and then I'll put them back on the next year.
And is that blocking just their home games or all games? All games.
Yeah.
Because I think I'll have to double check. I think the coaches they can block up to a certain amount of referees. I don't think they have unlimited
and I don't know
blocks.
what that's but I will tell you there was a school I didn't work at. It had nothing to do with the coaches because of where our locker room was. they didn't provide security from us leaving the gym to our locker room. And my brother got accosted in the hallway. And he called me. We talked to each other after all our games. And he said, I'm never going back. And I said, good to know. I'm not going either.
Yeah.
And they've never addressed the problem. So I have not done a home game in that gym. I do them on the road. I've not done a home game in that gym. I don't know how many years. Lots.
What's this is another question from the internet. What's the worst thing a parent or coach has said to you? Without putting expletives, knowing that we've got middle school kids that might watch this.
So years ago, I did a game in the Delta Center. It was a high school game, and I'll leave the schools out.
Jordan.
No, it wasn't Jordan.
07.
But we had a 50-50 kind of play. Two kids go diving for the ball, and I felt like nobody pushed the other one. They kind of dove after the ball, and we didn't call a foul. A couple plays later, we have another one, but one kid clearly pushed off, and so I came up with a foul. And as soon as I went to the table and I said, Blue, the coach that I called on said, Kinghorn, you suck. And I called him by first name. Yeah. You suck too. And I just like, what have I done? And so I called a technical foul and we do our deal. So my partner was a guy named Kim Nelson, who's the baseball coach at Timpanogos. Mm-hmm. Great guy. Get in the locker room. I'm like, Kim, do you think anybody heard that? He goes, Bret, everybody heard that. I'm like, ah. So I called the state and said, look, here's what happened.
Yeah.
And I said, if I need to write a letter or call the coach, the school, I will absolutely do that. I was wrong. I was clearly wrong. And he said, no, this coach has some really things going on in his personal life. His mother's very ill. He has a daughter that's might be terminally ill. He's got a lot going on. Mm-hmm. And it's not normally him. And he kind of lost his cool too. I said, yeah, but Jerry Bovee was the guy at the time. I said, Jerry, but my job is always to keep my cool. And I didn't. I mean, I didn't. And he said, well, if you want to talk to him, you can. And so I called him. And the only way I had to reach him was at the school, at the coach's office. And I left him a message. He called me back. And I said, Coach, I just want to tell you how much I apologize. I said, I was in the wrong. I think I got the call right, but I can't react like that. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm so sorry. And he got teary. He said, Bret, I owe you an apology. I have some things. And so he then told me the things that I had learned. He said, I got a lot of things going on in my personal life. And I said, I'm really sorry, Coach. Mm-hmm. And you know what? We were great. I mean, it was fine, but, that was not my finest moment.
Yeah.
Did you hit him with a tee?
I think I did. I don't really remember. I just remember when I yelled it, I'm like, what have I done? That was just so bad. So bad.
What about on the flip side? Have there ever been something that a parent or coach or player has said to you that kind of made you chuckle? Like it might have been an insult to you, but it was like, oh, that was kind of clever.
Yeah, but one doesn't really come to mind. But I will tell you, during COVID, one of the things I like about doing varsity games is there's a lot of people in the stands. I generally don't hear one person.
Just because there's too much overall noise.
Right?
Yeah.
Especially when there's students there, right? They're loud, and that's what makes it fun. But during COVID, there were only parents. And so I make a foul call. It's a game at Pleasant Grove, and the coach was a guy named Randy McAllister, who was one of the nicest guys you'd ever meet. He's just a peach of a guy. He's since retired, moved to South Carolina. But I'm standing by Randy during the first free throw, and this mother is calling me everything but a nice guy. And I go, Randy, that mother is letting me have it. He goes, Bret, you should hear what she says to me. I'm like, oh, so sorry, man. So they're not immune either, right? You get parents, but, and that was a COVID kind of thing, because in a regular game, you just don't hear that. But, you do hear stuff from the stands. And look, most of it I let it roll off my back. But, we had a playoff game a few years ago where a guy, every time we came to the table, he was right by the scores table, was jumping up and F-bombing us. Mm. And he didn't do it to me, but one of my partners told me, and I said, that's it. And so I went to the athletic director and said, the guy over there in that hat, he's got to go. And he goes, ugh. I said, we're not playing until he goes, we are not going to listen to that. And he goes, okay. And it was a visiting fan, so he went to the visiting AD, and this guy makes a scene, and he's yelling. And it's like, no, I don't have to listen to that.
Yeah.
And
what's so hard is I remember this as a player, whether my coach got a technical or parents got out of hand or the game got out of hand, like it wasn't beneficial to me as a player, right? And so I think to looping back to our big conversation here of the interaction between referees and everybody else, I've never been in a game or an experience where that kind of aggression helps your team. It doesn't help the game.
I think I shared this story with you offline, but one of my friends, Ken Sobey, who's since passed away, quick wit. I mean, he always had some witty comeback, right? And that's not me, but man, Ken did. But we're reffing Provo and another team when Kyle Collinsworth, who's the best player in the state, is playing for Provo. And Provo's winning by 100 points. I mean, they're just, it's not a basketball game, right? It's fourth quarter, and everybody wants to be out of that gym. So we're standing during a timeout, Ken and I together, and the other officials at the other end of the floor, and we're we're in front of the visitors' bench, and this father starts just letting Sobey have it. And I always cover my mouth on the floor. I'm like, so that guy giving you the business. He goes, I got him. I'm getting this team out of the huddle. I'm like, you got it. So as soon as the first horn goes, we have to go to the huddle and say, hey, that's first horn. Let's go break the huddle. So Ken goes over, and the kids start breaking. And he says, hey, which of you is getting embarrassed right now by your dad? What number are you? And 5 kids, boom, right to their shoes. Yeah. They don't want it. That's the thing parents don't understand. Your kid does not want you yelling, making a jerk of yourself. It doesn't help the team. It embarrasses them. I mean, it just does. And, I mean, that was it. The dad got the message because he said it just loud enough for the people behind the bench to hear it. And that was the end of it. I'm like, that really was brilliant. But I told him on the ride home, I'm like, that could have blown up in our face. You're lucky that worked. But it worked.
I sat with that guy's dad in church on Sunday. So, the following Sunday.
Yeah, right?
Brett, I super generous with your time. I have some lighter questions too for you. We did a whole episode on our favorite basketball shoes and shoes that I really enjoy. Do referees have kind of go-to sneakers that you wear? Is there a color code kind of rules around that? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so when I started a long time ago, Converse had a referee shoe that we all wore for years, and then they quit making them. When I started, you literally had to have all black shoes. So if it had anything on it, you were sharpening it, polishing it. It had to be all black. Now in the official's manual, it says a mostly black shoe. And so, look, I wear some kind of court shoes. So I wear some Nike Air Zoom, something that I can find that's all black. Look, I'm on my feet. I wore a pedometer a couple of times a few years ago, and I would run between 3 and 5 miles in a game. Wow. Right? Yeah. So you're on your feet.
Yeah.
They get a timeout. I don't.
And no subs either for you. Yeah.
And when you're an old guy like me, man, I love those timeouts, man. I need to catch a breath. And the kids that have it figured out, they come run out with water. I'm like, bless you. Right? But, so it's mostly black. And you're looking for a good court shoe, right? But people wear all kinds of stuff. I've noticed more guys this year wearing Hokas.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask, like, court shoe, it's not necessarily for traction. It's more for comfort. And the longevity of it. Yeah. Why all black? Is it just so it doesn't distract?
So our uniform, our uniform is prescribed in the official's manual. It says black and white striped shirt, black lanyard, all black whistle, black socks, black pants. If you're wearing underclothing, it should be all black. I mean, it's prescribed. And then it used to say all black shoes.
Interesting.
So now it just is.
The pants to me is interesting. Just as things have gotten more casual, I feel like in our dress, that pants are still the go-to uniform for a referee.
Have you seen the size of some of the people that referee? I don't think we want them in shorts.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
I will say, back in the day, we wore sans belts. You'd go to Mr. Mac and buy 100% polyester sans belts. That's what we wore because they discourage you from wearing a belt, but if you have a pant with belt loops, you got to wear a belt. But they would say, if you're going to move up, you don't wear belts. You wear sans belts. And my brother back in the day walked into Mr. Mac and said, hey, I need some black sans belt, 32-inch waist. And the guy goes, are you a referee? And he said, no, why else would I buy black sans? I mean, literally, they go, oh, yeah, that's a dumb question. Yeah. But now they've even really relaxed that. Like for the first time, wore joggers last year, some joggers that are really comfortable because I saw that some of the college guys wear them now, and my boss didn't say anything, so they're a lot more comfortable to wear, so I wear them.
Yeah.
Nice.
But,
Primo Golf Apparel, if you haven't tried any of the
Primo
joggers, they're fantastic.
Joggers,
local company.
Good to know.
I didn't know that. It's golf stuff, but it's really comfortable.
Shout out to our sponsor, Primo.
I like it.
Wearing the golf shirt right now. Know the owner. He's great.
Awesome.
But yeah, they're fun. I had a question.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story while you're thinking about it. So my first year, one of the things I do now is my brother and I started this years ago. We teach the first and second year officials because we felt like when I'm brand new, so my group in Atlanta, we had it. So they would break out. They'd give us general announcement. Then, okay, first, second, and third year, go over here. 4 or 5, go over there. And then everybody else is in a big meeting. Because we do training where we watch plays or talk about situations, whatever. Well, if you're brand new, you don't want to ask like, where do I stand when I do a free throw right? You just don't want to sound like an idiot. So we started this is a place where it's a safe place. Look, you can ask us anything. And one of the things we talk about is, what do you put in your game bag? And one of the things we recommend is have more than one uniform, right? So my very first season, I had one shirt, one pair of pants, socks, one pair of shoes. I mean, I didn't have any money. I'm just out of college, or I think I was still in college. And anyway, so I'm doing a game in Atlanta, big. It's a sophomore game, but it's a big rivalry game. And my partner comes up to me and says, "Hey, you got something on your pants?" And what it was is he could see the white of my white shirt tucked in. I'd split my pants, the seam of my pants. So he goes, "Here," he just kind of tucks it. It's in the first half. So we go in the coach's office where we're dressing. I'm like, what am I going to do? I don't have another pair of pants, but I literally split it all the way up the crotch.
Wow.
Right? Oh, crap. What am I going to do? We look around. I find a stapler.
Yeah.
Now, I have two of everything, because if something goes bad, I just, I want to be prepared for it. And I carry extra shoelaces, and I have extra whistles, and I have lanyards, and I have athletic tape.
Yeah.
And, you name it. It's like, look, I just don't want to be without, so I know. But yeah, that first year, I'm like, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have another pair of pants. So
how do you handle injuries, both if the officiating crew has an injury, but also a player injury? Like, are you interceding to try and help, or parents? And how does that all supposed to take place?
With players, I can tell you right away is I always err on the side of player safety. Mm-hmm. I don't care if you have a fast break. If a kid's down, I'm killing it. Mm-hmm. I don't want a kid have a problem. Yeah. And if a coach gets mad, I'm saying, look, I'm going to do the same for yours. It's safety first. So if I think there's something bad, I kill it, and I call the coach, like, you better come out. And I may ask a kid, like, you okay? Stay down. That's the one thing I always say, just stay down. We got somebody coming. And then I move away. I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do, so I get away. With us, I've been hurt a couple times during games. Like I've torn my calf muscle. It felt like I got shot. I literally turned around, and I had a trainer tape it. Like, we stopped the game. I just couldn't run, and I went to a coach and said, "Coach, I've done something bad. I don't know." I said, "I can't run." He said, "Then walk." He said, "I don't want you to leave." I said, "Okay, I'll do my best."
Yeah.
But I've had another time where I tore the other one, and there was a JV official, and I said, "Go get dressed." And I went to the coach and said, "This is what's happened. I can't go. I can't." Yeah. And I went to the Instacare that night, and they said, "Yeah, you tore it. So you're out a few weeks." So my age, that's what I worry about. Knock on wood, I didn't have any injuries this year. That's a big thing. But you know what? I'm on the treadmill every day. I can't get out of shape. It's too hard to get in at my age. So I do something every day.
Yeah. That's wild. I remember in high school, I was watching a baseball game, and an umpire had taken a step back, stepped in a hole, and he dislocated his ankle. Oh. And so I was like, man, we don't think about the officials very often until something big and major like that happens.
So, that now with 3 at the varsity level, we finished games with 2 when somebody's gotten hurt. It just, look, and I tell a coach, we're going to miss stuff. We don't have that third set of eyes. Yeah. We're going to do our best, but that's what it is.
Something happened this year at the state tournament with an official. I can't remember what it was, if he was lightheaded but they were wondering if he's going to come out after halftime, and he did. He did.
My brother was throwing the jump ball up in a college game years ago, and so we throw it one-handed, and you try and step back, but one of the jumpers, big guy, 6'9", 10, elbow right on top of his head, and about knocked him out. I mean, he was dazed. I mean, he was kind of staggering, and they removed him from the game.
Wow.
They had him go to the locker room and lay down because they thought he was concussed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that kind of stuff happens.
Take us through that form of throwing a jump ball, because I've always felt like you throw it to the other team a little bit more than you throw it to me.
So I'll tell you how they teach us to do it is you go to a basket, and if you throw it up through the basket and back down. So the rule says you're supposed to throw it higher than either of the jumpers can jump. Mm-hmm. Well, that's kind of hard. I don't know how high either of you can jump, right, if you're in the jump circle. So, it's that's why they took jump balls out of the game. Yeah. We weren't good at throwing jump balls for years. I mean, when I started, everything was a jump ball, and we literally threw them all the time. And we were probably better at them because we had a lot more practice than just before the game.
Yeah.
But
what about the over and back rule? That's the thing I've always had a question on. Of when is it called? Is it 2 out of a 3 points passing, or what does that look like?
So all 3, both feet in the ball, have to be across.
Okay.
And if only 2 are, you can back up into the back court. And that's a misunderstood rule. Yeah, you've got to have both or all 3 established in the front court. Then it can be a back court.
And then
violation.
if one goes back, then it's a back court? Not
Yep.
all 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
Once you're in the front court, can't go back.
We had an instance this year with 4th grade basketball, and I was coaching. Eric was the assistant coach, and I was screaming over and back, and we got the call. But anyways, my wife doesn't let me live it down that was 4th grade basketball. So
that just triggered the question that I couldn't remember. on the same team, we played another team, and our kids were all brand new. We played another team, and they were up by 40 points.
Do I need to leave?
And somebody almost got the cops called on him, one of us Erics.
Not quite.
But so they're up 40, and it's the third quarter, and then it gets into the fourth quarter, and they're still pressing. We have one kid that can dribble at all, like let alone pass, catch, go, and shoot. And again, they're up 40, and they're pressing like crazy. And so how do you deal with that, where one team is so much better? And I think most solid coaches will call off the dogs. Like they'll still play defense and everything, but they aren't embarrassing another team. Do officials have any insight into something like that happening?
So don't let me miss that part, but I want to make something really clear. Our job is not to make things equal.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people are like, it's 5-2 in fouls. Well, stop fouling.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, and before we capped it at 5, you know, you have 10 fouls in a half, and it could be 8-1. Well, the team that's got 8 is pressing or playing aggressive man-to-man, and the other team's sitting in the zone. Of course there's going to be more fouls, but even some coaches have a hard time with that they think your job is to make sure that it's even. And that's not our job. Nowhere does it say that the fouls are supposed to be the same, ever. So now to your question, my job is also not to hold the score down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the number one thing in high school sports, and in those captains meeting, I tell them, the number one thing in high school sports, sportsmanship. Sportsmanship. I don't tolerate trash talk. I just don't allow it. There's no place for it in high school sports.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if a team's up 40 and they're, you know, laying the wood to them, what we talk about is like every single thing they do had better be 100% clean. Mm-hmm. If they're pressing and trapping, if it's not, we're calling it.
Yeah.
Right now, that's really my attempt to say let's be good sports here. Right now, is a coach entitled to do that? Absolutely. You know, Bobby Bowden, the old football coach at Florida State, said, "My job's not to hold the score down. That's your job."
Yeah.
Right. So there is some balance there, but I also think with kids, like let's be good sports.
Yeah.
So we just talk about that, but I can't make them stop pressing.
Totally.
And I'm not going to make up fouls, but if they foul them, I guarantee you we're calling it.
Yeah.
Brett, how much trash talk is there at the high school level?
You know, there can be some, and one of the hard things is, and especially in a rivalry game, one of the things I'll tell the captains is I don't know who knows who.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know who played AAU together.
Right.
We don't know. So don't give me a reason that I got to get in the middle of you because I don't know who knows who. And I sometimes will make a joke like, I don't know who's dating whose sister, right? There could be some of this going on. I don't know, right?
Yeah.
I had a rivalry game in Utah County, and a kid went down near the end of the game. The team is losing, and I'm standing on the foul line with the kid who's going to shoot. I said, that's too bad. He goes, he's a big baby. I'm like, what? He goes, he's in my ward. He said, we were at Young Men's last night, and he wanted to talk to me about this game, and I wasn't even talking to him. And I'm like, only in Utah. How funny is that?
Yeah.
You know, I said, well, how's it going to be Sunday? He said, oh, I can't wait. You know?
Don't you feel like even in the game, I mean, and it's from probably the NBA that it's, you know, drifted down, but the hand signs and 3-point signs,
Celebrations.
and the good night, right? The Steph Curry stuff, and yeah, it's so much more prevalent for sure, even than when we played.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is. People ask me what's the biggest difference, and it's sportsmanship. I mean, back in the day, the kids would not talk back to us. You know, if a kid asked me a question, I gave him the answer, he'd say thank you and turn away, right? Now, if they don't like the answer, they may, you know, come back at me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I remind them, like, it's a privilege to get to talk to us. By rule, the captain speaks to us. That's it.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't have to talk to you. I'm doing it as a courtesy to you. So if you treat me like that, courtesy revoked.
Yeah.
This is what I think would be the crux of this. Maybe we should have started with this, but if they're a player or a coach, what is the most effective way to go about a basketball game? What matters and what doesn't matter from the official's perspective? Because we had talked offline, we don't have to mention names, but certain coaches get hung up on things that don't matter, and they're arguing with you about stuff that doesn't matter, and players that don't, I mean, it doesn't really matter. What does matter, and what should they come and talk to you about?
Well, look, I'm going to go to the Stevie Wonder plays. You know, Stevie Wonder saw it. Why are you asking me about that one?
Mm-hmm.
Now, a bang-bang play, a block charge, maybe a basket interference, you know, something like that, or a play right, you know, at the end of a quarter or something. Yeah, fair, absolutely. But the one that happens in the middle of the floor that everybody saw what happened, why are you arguing with me on that one?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a ham and egg call. Like that's not hard. Look, the one at the end of the game when I got to say with the ball out of his hand, those are hard. And yeah, you want to talk about that? Let's talk about it. That's fine. It's just, I don't know. you can win the battle, but you're going to lose the war.
Mm-hmm.
And I told a coach that. I said, you can't fight every fight.
Yeah.
You know, you wear me down after a while that I don't listen to you. I don't care what you say. And you could be 100% right, but you wore me out in the first quarter on every single thing that you thought was something that we didn't call or that we called that you didn't like. And so when we come down the stretch, when you really do have a play and it's a beef and you should be able to talk to me about that, I don't care, right? You kind of spent all your capital in the first quarter arguing about things that didn't matter.
Yeah. This is so invaluable, I think. And you had mentioned that some schools will have you come and talk to the players and the kids before the season or during the season. And I would just encourage any coach or player that has that opportunity to take it, whether that's with you or another official that they know, because as a player growing up and playing, and even now that I'm old and playing in men's leagues and stuff, it's just understanding that interaction and understanding what you see and how the rules are supposed to be called. And if I know that, it makes the game, I think, better for everybody.
And somewhat I would say about that is, look, I'm a necessary part of the game,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I will tell you, there is a problem today. We don't have enough officials.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to get to the point that games are going to be canceled. The poor officials that are doing freshman, sophomore boys and girls games, they get brutalized. And I think I shared with you offline. The problem is what's happening in those games. Players are learning to play. Coaches are learning to coach. Officials are learning to officiate. And if I see it going on, I'll tell a varsity coach, like, you've got to back your coach off. We don't want to lose this guy or gal. We need them because we lose so many in the first and second year because whatever the price was, $50 or $60, they just get their butts chewed. And you're just like, why? Why would I do this?
Yeah.
Like, I occasionally will be asked to go do a sophomore game. And look, I'm not perfect. I've reffed thousands of basketball games at every level. I know how to referee. Now, I'm not perfect, but I get most of them right. And when I hear these parents screaming at me, I can't believe that these sophomore officials stay because it's brutal because they don't have all the kids screaming like I do, right? That I don't have to hear them. And if I had anything I would say to these parents is like, put a whistle on. You think you're so good? Come out and try it.
Yeah.
It's one of the hardest things I've ever done. I've literally probably seen millions of basketball plays over the years because when I was coming up, I'd work 100 games in the summertime, right? Because I worked any AAU, junior jazz, church game. Because the biggest thing you need is to see plays. You need to be on the floor and just referee. You need to learn. Well, I've done that for a long time. I've seen lots of plays. I can kind of anticipate what's going to happen. And look, I still get fooled and I still miss them. But when you're learning, man, it is so darn hard because I can tell you I'm a great travel ref. I told you I'm terrible at traveling. In the stands, pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah.
But on the floor, man, it's hard. It's a whole different animal. And like something happens, you're like, crap, do I blow my whistle? And that's, I still will go help in my local church and I'll go do some games and they ask me to help them. And I'll say the biggest thing is blow your whistle. Because we think about it, then it's too late. Because literally, I wish it was like football where I could throw the flag. We get together like, nope, you know what? I'm going to wave that one off. I don't want that one. Yeah. I have it, I call it, or I don't have it, and I don't call it. It's bang, bang. And I don't have the benefit of,
replays.
No, and, here's the other thing I would say, and people ask me about replay in sports. I said, look, my opinion, every replay ought to be viewed at game speed. If we can't tell with the naked eye, then it shouldn't be reversed because the official had to make it in real time. I don't think anything should be slowed down. It's
a great point.
And if we can't tell, we can't tell.
Bret, final question from me. 35 years in the business. Who is the greatest athlete you have watched play basketball that you've officiated?
I'm going to answer it a couple different ways if I can.
Great, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to give a shout out to Tyler Haas. I don't know Tyler Haas. Tyler Haas is the best high school player. Just complete package.
Yeah.
Because he was the best guy on the floor every night. Tyler Haas got fouled probably every time down the floor. Tyler Haas never complained. Not one time. Every defense was set up for Tyler Haas. The ball went out of bounds. Guess who chased it? Tyler Haas. Okay? I just have such respect for that kid because of how he played the game. He was so good. Now you talk about the best athletes. I'm going to take the Jazz guys out because they were, right? I will tell you, though, back in the day, they would always stop when Ronnie Price was going to dunk in practice. Because Ronnie Price, 5'10".
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, he would do some amazing things when he'd steal the ball and go down and fast break in a scrimmage. Amazing. Jeremy Evans was the other one, back in the day, the slam dunk champ, because that guy could jump out of the gym.
The pogo.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I had Matt Harpering in high school in Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
There was a guy named Sharif Abdul-Rahim that played in the NBA for a long time. And one of my very first varsity games, he was a sophomore and went for 35. I just vividly remember because, holy crap, this guy is so good. And, then he ends up going to Cal and then the NBA. Here, Frank Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
He made a dunk in a game where he stole the ball, and his natural momentum as he ran to the basket, he's come down the left side, would be to spin this way. Frank Jackson went up and spun the opposite way, and I'm like, okay. And I'll also tell you another one, that Eric Mika. They used to at Orem High School, they'd have a national tournament. Now they have it at PG, but Eric Mika's running full speed, 6'10", and they threw an alley-oop from the back court. Eric Mika's running full speed, jumps in the air, catches it, dunks it. He's running so fast that his momentum took him all the way up. He was parallel to the floor under the basket.
Wow.
Swung all the way back out and then down. It's one of the best plays I've ever seen. A big guy.
Yeah.
I mean, 6'10", running full speed to catch it, dunk it, and not mess himself up.
Yeah, no
So,
kidding.
I mean, we see some great plays. We got great basketball in Utah. Yeah. When we do national stuff, the kids get intimidated at times, but once they start to play, our kids can play.
Yeah.
Our kids can play.
I love what you said about Tyler Haws and him going and get the ball for you, and I just want to kind of reemphasize that, of the idea of that if players can help out the referees, I think it goes a long way. And I think what you meant by that is the ball rolls off into the stands or it rolls off into wherever, and they run and get it rather than making you run and get it.
See, and one of the problems is, so we're supposed to always keep eyes on the players, right?
Yeah.
So I really can't go get the ball because I got to turn my back now, right? And something can happen.
Yeah.
But, he just, it wasn't like, Tyler, would you go get the ball, please? The ball went out of bounds, and he chased it.
Yeah.
Even if he wasn't the closest kid to it.
Yeah.
He had it figured out, And if I met Tyler Haws, I would say, I have so much respect for you because you didn't complain one single time. He'd get fouled, he'd hand the ball to you, walk to the free throw line, make us 2 free throws. Go to the other end. I mean, it was a kid who had it figured out.
Yeah.
Super good kid.
The other thing that you said that triggered a memory is you said, like, when the parents are yelling at you, you go officiate. So we had talked beforehand about a certain official that is ready to fight anybody. And I sent you a picture at a game I was at. I was like, this is the guy at that game.
And we were talking about the same.
Someone was harping on him, and he takes his whistle off, and he says, you come do this. And the parent stopped.
One of the best things that happens is coaches that do some scrimmages, right? And they realize how hard it is to do what we do. Look, I couldn't coach. I make no bones about that. What coaches do is difficult. Look, I watch film and I spend a lot of time at this, but after the game's over, I can forget about it. Now, I might have a play that eats at me, and I want people to know when we miss one, especially if it is significant, it eats at us. We want to be 100%, and we're not.
Yeah.
So don't think that it doesn't bother us, because it does, right? It does. But a coach lives with it, right? And I have a ton of respect for the coaches. We have some great coaches in the state of Utah.
Yeah.
A ton that I just think are such good people.
Last question from me, and it's kind of a two-parter here again. Why, it's a thankless job. Why have you done it for so long? And then advice to those who are considering becoming a referee, or those newer officials that are kind of that first couple of years where so many are lost. What advice would you give to them?
So why do I do it? I said you get on the floor, you either like it or you don't. When I started doing it, I'm doing it with my college buddies. We're having a ball. So it wasn't work then. As you kind of move up through the ranks, I don't know, being somewhat competent, there's some satisfaction. When I get to work in the state tournament, I've done it a few times. It's a big deal, right? You've earned that. And so I never take it for granted, that you get to be there. And we tell people, I have people ask me, could you ref at that level? I said, can I make the calls? Yeah, I can. I know that. Could I do Duke in North Carolina when it's on ESPN and there's millions of people watching and the place is sold out and it's Mike Krzyzewski and Dean Smith? I don't know.
And the students are 3 feet from you.
I don't know. Right? It's easy to say, if it's closed and it's doing the player, yes, I've done that stuff. I can do that. But it's, it's hard to say in the moment, could you really do it like that? So I do it because I like it. I mean, it gets me on the treadmill every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. my doctor at the start of the season. I had to go get a cortisone shot. Pardon me. I had to actually get my knee drained, and then I got a cortisone shot in both knees. And he said, shout out to Vern Cooley. He said, my goal is to keep you reffing. And I said, why? He said, because it gets you on the treadmill every day. It's going to keep you healthy. And I said, okay, let's do it. So, I'm planning on season 35. And, at this point in my career, it's every year. Can I still run? Can I still make the calls? Am I still getting quality games? Do people want to referee with me? Do the coaches want to see me? I mean, it's a year-by-year thing. And, I think I'll know when it's time to stop. My brother and I talk about it because he's a couple years behind me in experience. But, when we're not getting those games and you're not working deep in the state tournament, maybe it's time to stop. Yeah. And there's going to be people who come up and take our games. They'll keep playing them. People that want to come up in this, give it a try, and it's hard. It is hard to officiate. I don't care what sport you do. It's hard. You have to pay the price. I've been to dozens of camps. I paid thousands of dollars to get to them, to have people tell me how bad I was, and you need to do these things better. But I invested in myself because I wanted to be a good basketball official, and I'm reasonably competent. I don't kid myself that I'm the best, but I do okay. And so after doing a tough game, and a tough game doesn't mean you called a lot of fouls necessarily, but it might be that 1-point game that did we blow a whistle or not right at the end of the game. And those are tough games. And, there's a sense of satisfaction when you think you got it right. Yeah. So I think that's why I still do it. It's still fun.
I love what you said about not taking it for granted, because now as we've aged on, if there are any kids watching this, that high school or your basketball career is so short in the reality of it, of where you have the lights on, you have the cheerleaders, you have the scoreboards, you have the referees, you have coaches and the parents and the friends and everything going on. And you are a critical part of that, and you're a critical part of that game, because now as we get older and it's men's leagues or pickup, we don't have that aspect, and it brings a reality to the game that I think is great. So thank you for spending this time answering all of our crazy questions. And I think that anybody who watches this, I hope that they will pay attention and learn and become better basketball players and better parents and better observers and better referees and better coaches.
I hope so too. And the thing is, I especially for the parents, it's just go support your kids. Nobody says you have to boo when you don't like something. Cheer for your kids, cheer for your team. It should be a positive thing. And I think so much it's a negative thing, right? And even rivalry games, I don't have to hate the kids at the other school, because guess what? If I don't have them, we don't have a game, right? And so there should be fun in it. And it is so serious. And my brother and I were talking. I told him about doing this today, and he said, the thing is, there's so few kids that are going to play in college at any level that, after their high school career is over, to your point, it's over. But so many parents think, my kid, he's got it. She's got it. And the reality is they don't. And that's okay. The Peter principle, we all top out somewhere at something. We just do. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Right? We're not all, I didn't win the genetic lottery, right? I'm not in the NBA.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's still pretty fun to still be attached to the game that it's just been so fun.
Yeah.
I had to quit playing a number of years ago because of some injuries, right? And I miss playing.
Yeah.
I had a missionary companion that said, hey, I'm putting together a senior team for the summer games. Do you still play? I'm like, no, neither should you. Like, the last thing I'm going to do is tear my Achilles or blow my knee out, right? It's too hard to rehabilitate things now. I'm like, no, thanks. Yeah. So anyway, I love being part of the game. It's still fun. When we're in a big game and the gym is loud and it's a tied game, it's just like when you played. Mm-hmm. The adrenaline is there. It is so much fun. Yeah. That's probably why I officiate, because you get a bunch of terrible games during the year, but the handful you get that are fun, it's just like you were playing. It is so fun.
And Doug Meacham, when we interviewed him, said pressure is a privilege. And I think for sure that pressure is something that you just don't feel every day anymore as we get older. And I think that's a really cool thing. We need to get your brother on here so we can correct all the things that he said.
I don't think I talked too badly about him, but yes, he would correct it.
Thanks again, Bret. This was awesome.
It was fun. Thanks, Bret.